taken in by Destiny's gorgeous shell, a slick and striking wrapper that surrounds the hollow and unimaginative game languishing inside of it. Make no mistake, Destiny's mechanical basics are, for the most part, superb. Interacting with this multiplayer-only shooter is a delight. The gutsy shooting, the fluid movement, the intuitive menus, the smooth frame rate, all of these elements make for a fantastic foundation for building a great dynamic multiplayer shooter upon. The disappointment of Destiny is how it puts that solid foundation to use. The game is built upon soulless repetition of unimaginative ideas. Take, for instance, the story missions and strike missions, which have you taking to Destiny's broad and beautiful settings with a friend or two at your side. By and large, every mission task is built upon the same idea. Wait for your robotic companion, which is voiced by Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage, to hack into something, usually a door. Then you shoot a bunch of cool-looking aliens, and possibly a predictable bullet sponge boss that absorbs 5 minutes worth of gunfire before it falls. Then Dinklebot tells you he's finished, coincidentally right after you've finished killing the last enemy, and you enter the next beautiful area to do it all again. Different doors, possibly different enemies, but no meaningful attempt to differentiate the gameplay. Mind you, that shooting is typically top-notch. Pulse rifles shoot their rhythmic barrages with great power, and charging up a fusion rifle and releasing its payload is akin to holding your breath and then expelling it in one rewarding sigh. The game's best combat feature, however, might be its melee attack, regardless of which of the game's 3 all-too-similar classes you choose. Destiny nails its feel, that special, difficult-to-define something comprised of fluid controls, excellent collision detection, and awesome technology that makes every action silky and responsive. You can leap and glide through the air, a mechanic that gives Destiny a sense of freedom that matches its open spaces, and helps you escape danger when encounters get tough. The most powerful foes put up a decent fight, using cover to their advantage, protecting themselves with shields, or assailing you en masse. If only you got access to the aliens' cool-looking firearms, instead of being confined to the game's excellent but bog-standard arsenal. Luckily, you gain access to different types of slow-to-replenish grenades, and a few superpowers, such as the Warlock's magical area of effect projectile that takes even longer to recharge. But once again, those excellent basics are betrayed by slow-paced and redundant tasks that have you asking yourself, hey, isn't this the same canyon I was heading down 5 minutes ago? Hey, didn't I just cross this hill 10 minutes ago, and 20 minutes ago, and an hour ago? It's tempting to compare Destiny to full-fledged, massively multiplayer role-playing games, but doing so reveals how much more diverse typical MMOs really are. By contrast, Destiny gives its bland missions context so thin that it may have been better off without them. It certainly tries to tell a story that seems like it might come into its own about halfway through, when you meet 2 of Destiny's few non-Dinklage characters. Alas, Destiny wastes the opportunity to develop a mystery worth caring about, and reverts to more fetch quests followed by a manipulative ending that reminds you that the game's soundtrack does far more work in establishing this world's tone than the mediocre writing ever does. Dinklage's sleepy, not quite robot, not quite human delivery doesn't help in this regard, though to be fair, some of the item descriptions and the lore-heavy stories you can read on Destiny's official website fill in some narrative gaps. But you'd be hard-pressed to remember much that happened in Destiny's story, let alone understand them once you leave it behind, which might take you around 15 hours or so. There's loot, of course, much of it in the form of new weapons or weapon blueprints called engrams, which you can redeem at a hub called the Tower, which you share with a dozen-plus other players. If you're used to the plethora of loot you receive while playing games like Borderlands or Diablo 3, however, make sure to prepare for Destiny's slower pace for doling out rewards. It's perhaps befitting that meaningful new stuff doesn't come that frequently, given how Destiny on the whole feels like a standard-sized experience stretched entirely too thin. Other aspects of Destiny feel less stretched into oblivion than they do wholly underdone. The presence of other players not in your group, for example, is more window dressing than vital mechanic, given how few appear in your travels and how very rare public combat events are that bring people together. Once you reach level 20, you might enjoy the upcoming raid event, though it's not yet available as of the time of this review. It's not yet certain, however, that repeating a raid will be any more fun than repeating strikes and story missions, which, along with competitive multiplayer, are the only things you truly do once you finish Destiny's undercooked story. If you enjoy grinding for gear, that's a good thing. The promise of wearing better stuff is the sole purpose to forging ahead. The Crucible, where Destiny's competitive multiplayer lurks, is quite competent. Developer Bungie shows off its mastery of level design with maps of various sizes that get used across 4 different modes. 6-member Deathmatch finds its legs on maps that recall the winding corridors and central combat arenas of Unreal Tournament, and Team Deathmatch functions just fine. Control mode is the most enjoyable, however, allowing both lone wolves and focused teams to contribute, sometimes in the cockpit of one of the 2 ground vehicles available. There are some issues here, such as the way the auto-targeting can cause one opponent to grab your targeting reticle when you're trying to fire at a different target. However, competitive play proves itself a worthy way of leveling up and earning access to items you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. Please allow me to summarize Destiny by telling you what it was like to complete the story. Once the final, utterly hackneyed scene finished, my 2 fire team members and I were rewarded with the same exact weapon, even though all 3 of us were playing different classes, and we received a handful of currency. And that was the big narrative finale of a troubled game that excels in the basics but is lacking in creativity and heart. It is a clearly expensive game, lavishly produced and devoted to showing off its amazing but sterile environments that look like this world had far better stories to tell in the past, long before you ever set foot in it. The fantastic gunplay and promise of better loot could keep you pushing forward. The sheer lack of mission diversity and overall creativity, however, make it equally as likely you'll leave Destiny behind for something with more excitement and more soul.